Okay, Jim, now that you have the opportunity, tell the world what you think about either the 3 and 4 campaign or where this industry is going.
Well, one, I think the industry is finally getting some of its problems straightened around. I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, when the new rate stabilization rules came into play, many companies were ignoring its existence and weren't changing the rates on their own policies. Agents were selling policies that they knew were being raised before they went away. And everybody was ignoring the fact that eventually all those rates would have to be changed. Now in the last couple of years they started to change some of those rates, and those rates now are creating a sense in the industry that there's a crisis, that the industry has made another mistake, versus just not having done it right the first time. I suspect that in another year or two what will happen is this will all pass as well, and then the baby boomer generation will be allowed to increase the sales of long-term care, increase the companies going into it, and there'll be a boom in the long-term care market. In terms of the 3 and 4 campaign, I love the idea of an industry-wide campaign, but I'm very concerned that it remain focused on educating the people rather than on generating business for the companies and the agents. If it's going to be recognized as something other than a commercial activity, it needs to be focused on people learning what the need is and how they take care of that need, and who's going to be there and who's not going to be there to help with that.
What do you see the long term for the industry as a whole? Say 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road?
Well, I think that everybody in the industry believes that there'll be a kind of like a slow recovery from this concern of, do the companies know what they're doing and do they know how they're pricing properly, to where there'll be a big increase when the push of all the baby boomers running through the curve of the selling ages results in more of the big financial planning companies, the big mutual companies, getting very heavily involved in this process as a way to preserve assets that people have developed over the years.
If you could change just one thing, what would you change?
I would probably try to figure out how I could get the regulators and the companies and the agents to look at what are the right solutions to the problems that the industry has. A good example is that the companies don't want to be blamed for taking things away from the agents. The agents want to sell whatever it is that will sell the best quickest. And the regulators don't want the consumers coming to them because they made the companies raise the rates. But if they could get to the right rate level initially, and if the agents recognized that a higher rate was not necessarily a worse rate, and if the companies likewise weren't worried about losing market share, you'd have a much better and more stable product that people could count on and could determine how to buy it and how much to buy at what given time.
From your expertise as an actuary, how do you think that can be made where everybody works together for a unified moving forward?
Well, you almost have to do it through a group that's considered nonpartisan. So for example, for the most part, most people don't think of actuaries as having a partisan position. So if, for example, the American Academy of Actuaries and the Society of Actuaries were to get together with the regulatory bodies and come up with solutions that the companies, instead of fighting the regulatory approach, would endorse, then everybody would get in tune together. Now that's a big if, because companies generally resist regulation. Regulators want to regulate but don't want to get blamed for causing problems. And agents still want to sell the cheapest price. So that's the challenge, to try to make something like that happen.
All right, so we know what the challenge is. From your perspective, how can this be answered?
Well, again, somebody has to be able to make that first step. And the somebody probably needs to be at the regulatory level, because the insurance companies are always going to try to maintain the status quo rather than finding a long-term solution. Most companies are worried about what their sales are going to be next year, not what is the future of the industry 10 or 15 years down the line. From most companies' aspects, private companies, their view is, we'll worry about 10 years down the line, 10 years down the line. It's the same thing with the government generally.
That's what I was thinking in my head.
So it's a challenge, and it's not easy to do.
How can you make it happen? You're in this industry. How can you help make that happen?
All you can try to do is get people who are well respected within each of those component pieces to try to get that process started. There's been a number of things the long-term care section of the Society of Actuaries has done to make the industry even as good as it is now. Because if you think of how it was 20 years ago, it was much more anti-consumer in the long run and much more how can we sell more right now. So I think we're making progress slowly, but just as with everything, it's very tough to keep the political aspects out of what's going to be the best solutions for the long run.
Can this be done quietly, informally, and get people at least listening to each other and then move forward in a more formal push?
It's theoretically possible, but practically speaking, in order for it to happen, you have to get it out into the public sphere, because the regulators aren't going to do it in a back office, and once it gets out there for public comment, the companies will go after trying to eliminate the regulatory aspects of it.
I always believe there's an answer. I believe whatever the problem is, there's an answer. For every pot, there's a cover. For every question, there's an answer.
There are lots of answers, but there's also political realities. If you think about it, the things that are going on in the long-term care industry are very much smaller than any of the problems that are going on in what I'll call the society in general. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the Class Act in terms of trying to get off the ground.
Right.
So what you're dealing with is a very politicized process, because despite everybody's beliefs in let's do what's good for the long run for society, everybody is also invested in what's going to be best for me today. And those two things usually conflict.
We're going to make it so it's not going to conflict.
Well, I would love to see that happen. And likewise, I would love to see us focus this campaign on strictly the educational aspects. And even that's difficult to get organized, just to show you how political even the simplest things can be.
Let's just work on it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.